Well, the school teacher was rather proud of his English, and one day on my daily talk to Copenhagen about the ransom, when they were all frustrated and upset, you know, he said, "Let me speak to Copenhagen." So he grabbed the phone and he said, "Listen here, you have 3 days to collect the money, otherwise we start to shoot the crew. And you can put that in your pipe and smoke it." Which I thought was rather funny. Where the hell he got that from? Anyway, more weeks and that went on, but eventually the sum was agreed at, which the company would pay, and it was acceptable to the pirates. Then there was the problem of how to get it to them, because none of them had bank accounts, none of them had passports to go abroad and collect it. So the money had physically to be brought to them. And I said, how can a man from Copenhagen fly into Somalia, bring this money in suitcases on a camel or something over the desert without being robbed on the way, you know? They were really like a bunch of factory workers who'd won the lottery and lost the ticket. They didn't know how to collect the money. But eventually, to cut a long story short, it was delivered by some very brave men employed to bring it by sea in a small boat. And the money was physically handed over to the pirates, and then the delivery boat disappeared. So of course at that point the pirates had the money and the ship and the hostages, and we had to trust them to release us. But we hoped we'd built up a reasonable relationship over these weeks with them, and so it was. Well, about 20 of them left in that anchorage, and the final 7 were afraid to take the money ashore there for fear of being robbed, so we had to take them 100 miles up the coast and drop them off.
So you're dropping them off like passengers in the end?
Well, in the end we dropped the final 7 off at a place called Baila up the coast, and then we were allowed to flee off to sea.
And I think we need to know how you were feeling at that point once you...
Well, we were highly elated, but the warship had disappeared a couple of days before without explanation, and perhaps they were ordered not to witness the handing over of this dirty money. But that didn't comfort us, because we could have been pirated by some more people. So, you know, we had a very anxious few hours till we got a couple of 100 miles off the coast.
Does that happen quite a lot, do you think, that
we
ransoms are paid and ships are just left?
Well, we were among the first, you see, but the following day the warship appeared then over the horizon and visited us, Americans, and interviewed us, and I said, why didn't you attack us when we were in the tank and had sent the signal? Well, one of them said they didn't get the signal, which I believe is probably true. The other one said if we'd had such a signal to attack, put American lives at risk to rescue 4 Russians, 1 Irishman and an Englishman, we probably wouldn't have got permission. So our sacrifice was kind of in vain, really. Anyway, we eventually got to Salalah and we were debriefed and had medicals. And then the engineer and I went to Dubai, and our wives were flown out to meet us, and we had a very pleasant few days there and came home.
You sound quite sort of phlegmatic about it.
Yeah.
If it was me, I would feel quite... I mean, you used the word elated a moment ago.
Yeah, well, but I mean, at the time, I was never really in fear of my life. I felt they need us alive. They promised that we wouldn't really be hurt as long as they got their money, and I was pretty sure they would get their money, and therefore my job was to keep the Russians, you know, on side, and my Irish chief engineer, and just to live day by day, conserve the water and food that we had, and I, from the very beginning, I played down the cultural differences between us, you know, respected their sort of religious practices, and you know, and I ate their food, and I talked to them a bit. But because Omar the chief didn't talk even to his own men much, I stayed aloof a bit and I allowed the Irishman to do all the talking. He played dominoes with them and caught fish with them, and they much preferred him. I think he was a bit of a comic to them, you see, but I allowed him to play that role while I was aloof like their captain. And I feel that he and I got along quite well, really, despite the lack of language.
And just thinking about this whole issue of ransom, I mean, it's the British government's policy not to offer a ransom. I mean, what's your view on that?
Well, I think governments have to take that view. They're pretty unanimous that they do not pay ransoms to criminals. But the ship owner's in a different position. He's in business and he wants his ship back, which is far more valuable than the ransom. And he wants the crew back almost incidentally. And he's insured against these events. And so the last nearly 3 years, piracy's been thriving because they know they get their money. And they almost never get hurt. Navies capture them, photograph them, feed them, and put them back ashore to go home and don't do it again. But
and what's your view of that?
Well, that's the way it is. Our government told our Navy, apparently, don't bring them home here, because if we find them guilty of piracy and then send them back to their country, in Muslim countries, piracy is a capital offence, so you're sending them home to certain death. And then they claim asylum, and we have to give them asylum, so we look after these devils the rest of their lives. And then their families join them for humanitarian reasons, and then they get education and so on. So they say to our Navy, don't bring them home. So what's the answer, you know? Ultimately it is to see that Somalia gets a proper government, and then a Coast Guard and a Navy and police, and stop piracy. But people are not born pirates. It's lack of government and all the infrastructure that creates pirates.
Okay. And really my last question is, you know, it's 2 years down the line. What sort of effect has it had on you?
Very little on me. I've done 4 more deliveries since. And I've opened the village flower show because I'm some sort of a celebrity through this. So I've had a bit of fun out of it, you might say. Well, I painted this when I came home from memory of our anchorage. This was a little village of Gaba. And this was a plateau about 500 or 600 feet high, sandstone. And this was a wadi or arroyo, which is carved there over millennia, I suppose. There was no water actually came out to the sea, but there was a little freshwater lake in there. And a village of tents here, which the pirates had. And their boats were drawn up along the shore here. Some were fishermen's boats, tended nets and pots and things, but some came to us. And up here was the village of mud huts and straw roofs. And this little building with a tiled roof was said to be World War II field hospital belonging to the British when they were fighting the Italians here.